Thank you very much for your very kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here to celebrate this very important event on behalf of all the children of the world, the 25th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I listened with big interest to Mr. Cardonia's brilliant presentation earlier, and I think he said two things which are very important. Nearly all countries have now signed and ratified the convention. But what do we do to really make the convention happen, to really go further? And I think there are two things which are really important. One is that you need an independent national institution to monitor violation of children's rights, as mine, as an ombudsman that can be kind of a watchdog and telling the government when they're actually not doing enough on behalf of children. Secondly, I think we also need this complaint mechanism that was also discussed earlier, the third optional protocol. Because when children's rights are violated, what do they do? Even in Norway, when we have, it's quite good to be a child in Norway, but if your rights are violated, where do you go? I mean, you don't have access to court by yourself, and we have very few national complaint mechanisms for children. So they need this mechanism. And I have to congratulate Spain actually on signing and ratifying the third optional protocol. And I think that's really great. And in Norway, we haven't done that, and I'm embarrassed about that. And I'm working really hard to make that happen. And I'm really impressed that you have done that, and you're a very good example for my country in that regard. I would like to start with showing you a little bit of film about our office. We actually made it to tell Norwegian children about what is an ombudsman, who are we, and why are we there. And I would like to share it with you. It's the first time actually I show it to an international audience. So here it comes. Oh, what happened? Oh.
Maybe you've heard of the Ombudsman for Children. We're the ones who make sure that the opinions of children and young people get heard, and their rights are supported. We do this by making sure that the people in charge who make decisions are doing their job, so that everyone who grows up in Norway can have a good, safe childhood. Well, of course, it's not always that easy. Both children and young people can experience insecurity, loneliness and unfairness. But there's always someone who can help you, and they are close to where you live. If you're getting bullied, you have the right to have an adult do something about it. You can talk to your teacher or head teacher who will do something when they hear about what's happening. If you feel that you won't get any help at your school, there is actually someone who is in charge of making sure that the school is doing its job. The county governor has to make sure that the school obeys the law. If you make a complaint, the county governor will tell the school what it needs to do to obey the law. There is always someone in charge of making things work, and the Ombudsman for Children makes sure it stays that way. Maybe everything is fine at school, in the classroom and during breaks. But when you come home, maybe things aren't so good. Perhaps your parents have enough problems looking after themselves, so what should be a good, safe place becomes scary and dangerous. It shouldn't be that way. Both the school you go to and your local authority can help you, and your family. But they have to be told that you are having problems. Child welfare services exists for all the children and young people all over Norway. If you're scared of the people who are supposed to protect you, child welfare should be told about it so they can help you. It is against the law to hit children in Norway, and no one can do anything to your body that you don't want them to. You can always call the emergency number for children and young people at any time you like and talk to someone who can help you. There are no stupid questions, and you can completely trust the person you talk to. The Ombudsman for Children makes sure that these kinds of places exist for children. Fortunately, lots of children and young people never experience bullying or serious problems at home. But children who don't have problems still have rights. Even though your parents can make decisions about you, all children have the right to a say in their own lives. For example, if your parents are divorced, you have the right to an opinion about where you are going to live. And you have the right to privacy and to have your views respected no matter how old you are. The Ombudsman for Children is always working to make sure children and young people are able to take part and give their opinions in society. You can get involved in the school council the local youth council or regional youth council, to have your voice heard in the local authority and the county you live in. It's good to be a child or a young person in Norway, but it doesn't just happen all by itself. We at the Ombudsman for Children have been working since 1981 to make sure that all children feel safe and protected and get the chance to take part and be heard. And those are the things we are going to keep working on.
I'm going to talk a little bit about Korea and child rights impact assessment and how we do that in Norway. And I want you to remember one thing when you're leaving this audience later today, and it is that the most important thing is to talk to the children. Listen to the children, they are the experts. And that's what I'm going to use my 20 minutes talking about, actually. In Norway, we have been very good at listening to other groups, for example, disabled, elderly, women, family, but we haven't been good enough actually listening to children's experiences. And of course, in a free and developing democracy, we have to include new groups. And now I think time has come to actually really include children also in policy making. In modern welfare states, our obligation is to develop safety nets to protect the population. And the CRC, Convention on the Rights of the Child, gives us a special obligation to protect children. And in order to be able to do this, we need to identify holes in this safety net. In this picture, actually, you can see a 7-year-old boy in the middle of the picture. He was called Christopher, and he was killed by his stepfather. He beat him and exposed him to serious violence for almost a year, and nobody reacted. The school, the child welfare system, the neighbors, the mothers, lots of people knew, but they didn't act. So the safety net around that boy was not good enough, and that actually ended up costing him his life. Because of that, I was also very glad that Mr. Cardonia was so clear about we must have a zero tolerance when it comes to violence against children. It's so important. And actually in Norway, in 2005, in our legislation, we have a new law about that, that says that you're not allowed to use any forms of physical violence against children, including corporal punishment. Not at home, not in school, not anywhere. And the Ombudsman for Children was a very important. We took a lot of part in creating that law. I was recently in Vietnam, and they have a lot of corporal punishment in school there, and I don't know what it's like in Spain. But I asked the Vietnamese children, well, how do you feel when you get punished in class? When the teacher, that should be your kind of the one you are looking up to, are exposing you to violence. And they said, well, would you get afraid? And then we don't learn that good. And I mean, that was a very reasonable way of thinking. And I think that is why it's so important to listening to children. For example, when it comes to corporal punishment, maybe we think it's a good idea because they will get quiet or listen better. But actually what happens is that they get afraid and actually lose the ability to learn. As an ombudsman for children, one of my most important duties is, of course, to find the holes in the secure net that I just described for you. And the child rights impact assessment can help you to identify these holes. And I think the best way to find out and find these holes is to listen to children who themselves have experienced falling through the safety net. So I think it's very important, and we need to develop a policy, when we develop a policy for the future, is to have what I'm going to talk much more about, the child perspective. So, do you really listen to children, or are we like this guy over there? I have honestly to say that when I was working as a pediatrician, as a medical doctor in the hospital, I was not that good at listening to children. I was a good doctor, but I wasn't actually thinking about asking them, for example, about their experiences, about the healthcare we provided to them. I took for granted that the parents were speaking on behalf of them. But I've learned later that when speaking directly to the children, you get so much useful information, and sometimes the world is completely different, and the reality for children is actually completely different from what you think as an adult. And I think all of us here, except my 2 children over there, we really don't know what it's like to be a child anymore, because the society has changed a lot since we were children, so we are no longer experts. I think speaking to children and get their personal histories can help us a lot in seeing and finding out about the real life out there. And on that basis, and also, of course also on the basis of research and other knowledge and inputs, we can lobby for policy change. And central in all this work is information and dialogue with young people. And for me, it's been quite successful, actually, in Norway. Last year, we launched a big report. It was called Health on the Premises of a Child. And we interviewed more than 200 children about their experiences about the Norwegian healthcare system. So the voices of children were actually the most important part of our report. And we handed it directly over to the Minister of Health, and he actually really listened, because he said that, well, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about how children felt. This is so useful. For the first time, I really get the impressions and the meanings and the feelings of children. So he actually changed a lot already in 1 year. He did a lot of what we recommended in the report. So listening to children is also quite effective when it comes to influence politicians and new policy making. We listen to children when we create statements. We listen to their opinions when we analyze existing law, policy, and practice, and also when they comment on proposed new legislation. So we use child rights impact assessments in almost all our work. The Article 12 in the Convention of the Right of the Child is my favorite article. And it says that it's not voluntarily, actually, to listen to children. It's obligation you have got. And as you can read here, it says that state parties shall assure to the child who is capable of forming his or her own views the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting the child. And it also says that for this purpose, the child shall in particular be provided the opportunity to be heard in any judicial and administrative proceeding affecting the child. So, as you see, this is not voluntarily. This is something we are obliged to do. We have to do this, to listen to the children. As you can see, when it comes to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, we like to divide it in 3 different parts: protection, provision, and participation. In lots of countries, including Norway, we are most concerned about protection and provision, which is, of course, very important parts. But I think the future lies in the participation. You need to listen to children's experiences to make sure that you can properly protect them, and to make sure that you can actually build child-friendly services, which is accessible for them and which is really useful and good for the children. And I think that when we are talking of consequences for children, we too often rely on how adult researchers and field workers define the lives of children. We like to talk to the professor, but why don't we talk to the child? So it's very, very, of course, important also to listen to adult experts, but the prime and the first expert is the child itself. In my office, we listen to children by using expert groups. And as you can see, we have had lots of different expert groups. We have had expert groups of child exposed to violence and sexual abuse, children with parents in prison, minority children, dropouts from school, children living in poor families, Roma children, and children in split families with high-level conflicts. And it's been so useful, and we've got so much new information that we didn't have before speaking to these children. We actually developed something called an expert handbook about how to organize an expert meeting and how to do it in practice. So you can download that on our webpage if you want to be inspired about how to listen to and to talk to children and to use them as experts. This is an example of hospital experts that we had. And they gave some very good advices to the doctors, the 10 commandments, we like to call them. And now they're actually implemented in all the hospitals of Norway. And all the pediatricians and the doctors working with children and the nurses, they have to read them. It's actually written down in the regulations. And they also have to carry this, or they don't have to, but a lot of them carry this little thing in their pockets to remember. And the commandments are quite simple. But it's like children want information from professionals, not just from their parents. Children need all the information, but don't scare them. Be positive, calm, and friendly. Don't use abbreviations. And speak to the point, but not in Latin. I mean, it should be quite obvious, but sometimes doctors forget. So it's important to remember that you are speaking to children, not to adults. This is another expert group we had on girls exposed to incest, and they gave some really good advice about how to create the whole healthcare system around them and to help other children experiencing same things in the future. Here you can see a picture of the head of the prison in Oslo. And these two girls you can see here, they had parents or fathers in that prison. And the visiting facilities for children were really horrible. So the children didn't want to visit. And we actually arranged a meeting with the head of the prison. And as you can see on the picture, he looks a bit afraid. I mean, this is funny but scary at the same time. But he actually listened really well to what the children had to say. And they made this drawing about how the ideal visiting facility should look like. And actually, the head of the prison took them really seriously, and he created visiting facilities very close to this drawing. I think they got almost everything on that drawing except, what do you call it, this trampoline, or this thing to jump on. Oh, I don't think they got that, but they got the rest. So they didn't complain. So, why is there a picture of a moose coming up here? Well, in Norway, we had something called animal rights impact assessment, because we were so worried and conscious about avoiding accidents between traffic and wildlife. So we produced an impact assessment when building new roads in order to find out animal crossings, etc. But we didn't have the same focus on children when we did public planning. So in a way, you can say that the moose and animal actually had, in a way, a bigger focus and better rights than children. And of course, that's not good enough. So the Ombudsman, we worked to change that. And then they created something called tracking children, which is, I think, a very good example of how you can do child right impact assessments in practice. And in this, it's not my office doing this. It's actually the municipalities doing it themselves. And they're involving school and individual cases in this work. Here you can see some pictures of some children involved in this. So, how was it done in practice? Well, the children were asked about, when you're getting to school, where are the potential dangers? When you play, where do you spend your time? Where do you play? What do you do? They were asked about places they like and places they avoid, and what can be done to improve the places they didn't like to go to. And also about, for example, the schoolyard, what kind of improvements could be done. And the children actually, they draw and make notes on digital maps. And this can also be done on ordinary Google Maps, for example, where children work together in a classroom in a paper-based activity. And anybody can actually do this. Here you can see a child sitting and looking at a map of the area where she lives. A closer example of the map. And here is actually the result after the children had been drawing and giving all the details. And this is very important, for example, if you want to plan a new road. It's very important to know where are the children playing. You can see here the purple areas are the areas where children are playing all year. The blue areas, it's where they play at winter time, and the yellow where they play at summertime. And of course, it's very important for planners to take this in consideration in order to minimize the effect on children's playing areas, for example, when constructing new areas or when building new roads. So I think this is a very good example on how you can involve children actually in quite, daily life things happening out in the municipalities that actually have a big influence on children's lives. And here, after looking at this map, they decided to replace the track of the road, not to put it directly through the areas where the children were playing, but actually to put it a little bit around, which was, of course, very, very good and important for the children. So I think I just spent my time. That was just a few examples, but please, as I said, when you go home from this conference, remember that I think listening to children really lies in the future of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. It's important with participation and protection, but listening to the children is the future. They have to be better, everybody. And it's really important in new policy making and when you're planning new laws, the budgeting, everything to actually talk to the children, which are the experts on their own lives. Thank you very much.